Jim! Jim! Give us a wave.
Oh, is that Chris?
Thanks, Jim. Oh, there's Gordon. There's Gordon.
Tom.
Oh, hiya.
Yeah.
This is my brother's fiancée and my mother.
Yes, I have to, yeah.
Glad I'm still drinking.
Yeah, contingent.
Oh, well done.
While all these Tories are walking in, they sent the police over to complain. So we showed the police our permission from Strathclyde. The police said, yeah, fair enough, on you go, good luck. Anyone walking this Tory around.
I live in his area.
Make it.
Well, actually, I've only been to Paris with
And the man who is going to be the first Prime Minister of India.
I got an irate telephone call from a man who said he was voting Labour, objecting to me saying that Neil was highly as granny for blue. So perhaps my language was too extravagant, and I can perhaps borrow from the old song, "You can't push your granny off a bus." He went. Fascinating to hear Alistair say that Alistair is the Foreign Secretary, because I understand that Michael Forsyth is leaving the country shortly after. That's a great pity, because I was going to make him ambassador to Rockall. This is one of the great historic moments in Scottish history. 1314 was a very important moment when James VI translated himself to James I and set up that first umbilical link between us and government from south of the border. Was another one. 1707 was another one. This is another one. In this election, our opponents, our unionist opponents, are setting out a stall and asking our people to buy what we've got on offer. What the Scottish National Party is doing in this election is holding up a mirror to the Scottish people and saying to them, have a good look at yourself. On this occasion, we have to decide what kind of people we are. We are the 20th century equivalent of the Bannockburn generation. At that time, because of a combination of historical, strategic, military and political circumstances, either had to stand or flee. And I've often wondered what it's like to be a member of a generation that doesn't have too many choices, that it either finds the bravery and courage within itself, or it finds that those qualities aren't present and it must retreat. Well, we in Scotland in 1992 are as much on the spot as folk were in 1314. We have a clear choice before us as a people. We either stand for our own country, we either act to advance the cause of our own country, act to advance the cause of independence, or we turn and flee. No Scot who is an adult with a vote in this election can avoid the historic responsibility that rests upon the shoulders of every single one of us. This, without question, is the most decisive decision that any of us will ever make in our lives in respect of our nation. We will have to decide the future fate of Scotland and no one else. Now let's look at the stall that's laid out by the unions and the price that they are asking our people to pay. And we'll start with the Tory unions. We've been visited by the most eminent members of the London establishment. National humiliation to an end, and we've got to do it on the 9th of April. Bringing to the Scottish people a vision, not just an SNP vision, but a vision of what they themselves will be able to achieve when they accept full responsibility for the state of Scotland and realise you can only exercise it when you keep the power of Scotland inside Scotland instead of giving it away. You can achieve full employment. One of the things I'm very proud about in this positive campaign of ours is that for the first time in 20 years, the banner of the right to work and full employment has been raised by this Parliament. Ordinary men and women in our country have, in terms of wealth and ability, as themselves as individuals. Whether they can live a good life is entirely dependent upon whether they can get work or not. So therefore, an economic policy that creates a labour market where full employment is a human right is something that is fundamentally good and decent for every citizen in our country. We can do it. When we stop spending our contribution to try it, weapons of utter destruction which are deeply immoral, and transfer that money to civil society, to build the houses our people need, to improve the schools that our children have, to improve the National Health Service. When we are doing those things, we'll create the 200,000 new jobs that our people and our economy requires. And when we control ourselves and write off the capital debt in housing, we'll not have to wait the 300 years to cure dampness, as Labour's convener in Glasgow. Capital debt in 4 years will put back into our housing £1.3 billion. That's how we create the housing, end the overcrowding crises, and give our people dignity in their own homes. But we also have to look at ourselves in a wider context. We have to take the decision about ourselves in Europe this year. And there's a reason for that. At the summit in June in Lisbon, the European community is going to discuss extending its membership. That's when Austria's position, Finland's position, and Sweden's position are going to be discussed. They will be changing the community's institutions to accommodate new members and the smaller states. If we missed the boat in 1992, if we postpone the vital decision and Europe moves on, if we wait 5 or 10 years and then try to elevate our status, they will with all justification point out that we had our opportunity in 1992 and missed it at that crucial period. This is the historic moment for the Scottish people to decide exactly where we want to be inside the European community. There is a dictum that governs all human society, and it's this: if you do not exercise power over yourself, someone else exercises power over you to your serious disadvantage. That is a lesson the Scottish people have ignored to our disadvantage and our peril. Just think what it will be like when we're independent. Just think of the freeing of the Scottish intellect and the Scottish political spirit. If we were meeting here for a Scottish general election, and we or any other party came up with a brilliant idea to advance the cause of our people, to improve our economy or our social position, and you suddenly realise that you can do it on your own, you can make the decision on your own, never again would we be required to get on a train or a plane and go to London and ask if it's acceptable and then accept it when it's rejected. All our brilliant ideas, all our energy would be able to have full play inside our own society. Look back on our tragic 20-year past. How many times have you seen shop stewards, men and women, coming on our television screens, fighting closures and redundancies? Able people. How many times have you seen Scottish working people using all their talent and their energy to defend, to be beaten, to retreat, to defend, to be beaten once again as closure after closure comes upon us? What if we live in a society where we use our talent, our energy, and our intellectual power not to defend and retreat against external forces, but to advance the cause of the Scottish people? The message we must get across to our fellow citizens in the next 4 days is that on the 9th of April a new Scotland will be born, one in which we will be a proud people, not claiming to be better than anyone else, but telling the world that we have arrived, that we are willing and able to make our contribution to how human society conducts itself now and in the future. And one of the proudest points of our election manifesto isn't about ourselves internally, it's about our commitment to the poorer people of this world. We have 2 elements of our international programme that we must propagate. The first is that if you're going to have world peace, there cannot be world peace until there is world justice in economic and social terms between the rich north and the poorer south of this hemisphere. Western Europe is a safer place now since the demolition of the Berlin Wall and the dissolution of the Warsaw Pact. But if you're living in East Timor, if you're living in Africa, if you're living in South or Latin America, the world is not a safer or a better place. It's a world ravaged with strain, tension, hunger and deprivation. And we have a fundamental duty that we are going to carry out in year one to meet that United Nations target of our contribution. Element of our foreign policy is about tribing. Of course, in domestic economic terms, it's a sensible thing to take the money from that weapon and put it into civil society. But there's a bigger purpose than that in our policy against tribing. Gerald Kaufman for the Labour Party has lined himself up with the Tories on this. Don't be kidding about the 3-vote, 4-vote difference. Labour have a 4th vote exactly the same as the Tories. What they've said, in Kaufman's words, that they'll keep the bomb until everyone else has given up the bomb. Well, consider the world in its totality. If we in Scotland and the people down in England are not faced with any single discernible enemy, if we are not under threat from anyone, but yet claim that we must retain nuclear weapons, what do we say to people who are genuinely under stress and strain and under potential attack? How can we tell those people in the world that they shouldn't have a bomb? They are going to reply to us, if you need to keep something when you're not under attack, we need to have it when we might be under attack. If the Labour Party continue with a policy, if the Tories continue with a policy, it's a formula for the spread of nuclear weapons throughout this country. This morning in the radio programme with Donald Dewar and Chris Mason of the Liberals, saying, so if you got rid of it north of the border and they still kept it south of the border. That is a decision for people down there. I would regret it, but we would be able to make our significant contribution. We would be the first territory in post-war years that said we had a nuclear weapon in our soil and sea. We no longer have a nuclear weapon on our soil and sea. Theirs is a formula that will endanger the world. Ours is a formula to ensure that the world can progress in peace. But I end now, friends, with a quotation from one of the greatest Scots who has ever lived. In the last few days, you will be on a roller coaster of emotion. We will have moments of elation and moments of anxiety. Everybody knows that. We'll sometimes go to bed at night and wonder if all this sacrifice is worth it. Maybe the last person you canvassed will say something ridiculous like, I don't think we are good enough and big enough for it. And you say, you know, it's all worth it. Well, let me quote from, as I say, one of the greatest Scots who's ever lived. And I'm like you, I get moments like that as well. In the leadership, you're not supposed to say that. In 1820, 3 Scots, Baird, Hardy and Wilson, were executed for high treason In 1820, they were sentenced to be hung, drawn, and quartered. As an act of mercy, they simply hung them and beheaded them. They were tried in Scotland under English law. And at the end of the trial, James Wilson made a statement. And this really shows you not much has changed. The newspapers were warned to use their discretion on what they reported. Most newspapers, like the Glasgow Herald, commented. He stammered out a few words in an incoherent manner. Remember that. A few words in an incoherent manner. Let me read you the speech of James Wilson to his judges. My lords and gentlemen, I will not attempt the mockery of a defence. You are about to condemn me for attempting to overthrow the oppressors of my country. You do not know, neither can you appreciate my motives. I commit my sacred cause, which is that of freedom, to the vindication of posterity. You may condemn me to immolation on the scaffold, but you cannot degrade me. If I have appeared as a pioneer in the van of freedom's battles, if I have attempted to free my country from political degradation, my conscience tells me that I have only done my duty. You are on the scaffold and be exposed as the head of a traitor, but I appeal with confidence to posterity. When my countrymen will have exalted their voices in bold proclamation of the rights and dignity of humanity, and enforced their claim by the extermination of their oppressors. Then, and not till then, will some future historian do my memory justice. Then will my name and sufferings be recorded in Scottish history. Then will my motives be understood and appreciated. And with the confidence of an honest man, I appeal to posterity for that justice, which has in all ages and in all countries been awarded to those who have suffered martyrdom in the glorious cause of liberty. James Wilson marched to his death under a banner, Scotland, free or a desert. He said he would be vindicated by posterity. We are that posterity. Scotland could have and shortly will have.
Sundays, I have to wait for this week to get 4 picks. On the campaign trail, you'll ask some very daft questions by our friends at the press corps. And one of the things I'm asked at press conferences these days is say, are you confident? Are you confident? You go, yes. But are you really confident? how confident we are. I've been passed a note about the financial appeal this evening. At the end of this meeting, we're taking a special collection for Michael Forsyth's airfare next silly question. You get some very useful information indeed. And I'm very grateful for Dave Coots, our candidate in Dundee East and the next Member of Parliament for Dundee East, who's passed me a copy of Labour's 92 manifesto. Labour's 92 manifesto, the Dundee version. This manifesto strikes out and calls for proportional representation. No half measures, it calls for proportional representation, full PR. It also calls for legislative independence for Scotland. Now I can see you thinking, we knew that John McCallion was under pressure. We weren't aware he was departing so far from the Kinnock and Dewar line. Well, this manifesto is actually the 1892 manifesto. It's the address by James MacDonald, the Labour candidate, to the people of Dundee. And I'll tell you this, if I'd been around in 1892, I'd have voted for James MacDonald. As a warning and an illustration. Does it tell us why we're slightly concerned about the slippage in the self-government timetable? I mean, it's been 100 years and they haven't implemented either PR or legislative independence for Scotland. Trying to run down Scotland's prospects. He was that night, the 6th of February, playing the Shetland card. Because what he was arguing was that Scotland became independent, then Shetland would opt to go with England. Interesting argument, this one. I think it's probably confusion. You know, in the fishing industry, we've got a term, the Shetland box. And I wonder if Malcolm's got confused about that box that's out in the sea in the maps. He actually thinks that Orkney and Shetland are near England. I was going round a factory in Sanka a week past Tuesday. I'll tell you, after touring that factory, I didn't need Systems 3 to tell me that Ian Lang was going to be out in the sea. From Yorkshire, and we kept bumping into them as we made our procession through the aluminium factory. And at the end of the tour, one of the guys came up to me because we'd been rehearsing and talking about the arguments as we went along. And he said, look, I've only got one thing to say to you. If you go independent at the election, Yorkshire's coming with you. SNP policy, but I know a man that might be willing to talk about a transfer. You know, Yorkshire moving north and Orkney and Shetland. Of course, one of the good things, and one of the reasons that the Shetland card hasn't been played throughout the campaign, was the reaction in Orkney and Shetland to Malcolm's statement on the 6th of February. when he was condemned out of hand by the Shetland movement, by the Shetland Island Council, because they realised, as we realised, the absolute importance of making sure that Scotland is not divided and ruled by people like Walter Rifkin. I've been calling the sorry campaign of denigration the Shop the Jocks campaign. But listen, when it comes to running Scotland down, the Labour Party need no lessons from the Tories. Their campaign is slightly different. It's not so much Shop the Jocks as the smears and fears campaign. And one of the earliest examples of this was on Monday the 10th of February, when Labour's shadow trade industry spokesman, the rising star of the party, Mr. Gordon Brown, alleged that independence would, quote, cut us off, and said, quote, we do not construct barriers at a time when everyone else in Europe is starting to dismantle them. He was raising the spectre of customs posts at the border. Now, all this wasn't new to me. Some of you know I cut my political teeth in West Lothian in the 1970s. And the MP for West Lothian then, the MP for Linlithgow now, was Tam Dale. And Tam's famous for the West Lothian question, the great constitutional argument about whether or not under devolution you could have MPs down in Westminster still voting on English matters if a Scottish Assembly had taken control over Scottish laws. Well, you know, when Tam was campaigning in West Lothian in the 1970s, and when he was campaigning in Bathgate and Albany and Whitburn and Lothian, he didn't campaign on the West Lothian question. It was a much simpler, much cruder message that Tam offered to the people in that impeccable accent. What Tam used to say is, if Scotland becomes independent, you won't build the Mystery of Granny in Newcastle. I thought that this was all in the past. It was all gone. I had this sort of curious idea we're all living in 1992. And at the end of this year, there won't be a barrier or customs post from the north of Scotland to the southern tip of Greece. I thought that was the position. But oh no, Labour's shadow trade and industry spokesman has better information. He wants to have customs posts at Carter Bar. My constituents, my fish processing constituents, have been severely inconvenienced over the last month or so by industrial action among the Spanish customs officers. And these boys in Spain have been going on strike because even before the completion of the single market, there's an agreement in Europe to dismantle internal barriers and they're losing their jobs. Well, let a message go out from Glasgow tonight to these Spanish customs officers under pressure. Gordon Brown can save your jobs. The real level of Scottish unemployment, not the red Tory figures, below the 5% level, and we are going to achieve the levels of employment already achieved in other small European nations. Has the most important social commitments. I think the worst gaffe of this election campaign was hardly picked up by the press corps at all. And that was a week past Friday, when Ian Lang was on the BBC programme, the Election Hustings programme, with me and with others. And the subject matter of that discussion turned to the question of low pay. One of the great scourges of Scotland. In the rural areas, in the industrial areas, low pay affects up to a third of our people. And Ian Lang declared in that programme that he had been talking to people, low-paid people in his constituency that very morning, and they were happy to be low-paid. Well, we'll see next Thursday how happy they are. Is a watershed for Scotland. The Scottish people next Thursday can choose once and for all to be done with a sterile UK political debate, a debate that's been seen in its most pure, its most destructive in the English general election campaign. Scotland needs and deserves much more than the logjam of a bankrupt union. The union has had its time and it's failed its test. It is time for a change. Not a change of faces or management, not just a change of style. It's time for a real change in Scotland, and a real change now. For the Union is found from the mouths and out of the words of those who sought to defend it in this campaign. They have been reduced to the language of denigration about the prospects for their own country. That's why Donald Dewar compared us to Bangladesh when he was talking about the economy, or Ian Lang when he was finished his protocol with the penguins compared us to Albania. Unionists today and over the centuries have protected their own positions by running Scotland down and telling Scots that we, among all the peoples of the world, are not capable, are somehow not up to running our own affairs. As you saw in our broadcast earlier this week, since the American Declaration of Independence, 160 countries have claimed their independence. And in each one of these countries, there have been people like Donald Dewar and Ian Lang all over. The scaremongering message has been the same for each of these countries. Only the message boys have changed. Only the names have changed. Yet 60 nations have risen above the smears and fears and gained their independence from London. So will Scotland on Thursday. Self-confidence, self-respect, and national pride. But these advantages will wither and die if we do not put them to their proper use. Only full independence within the European community can put that vast potential to work for all our people. Now, tonight I want to send a very clear message to everyone in Scotland. Do not sit on the sidelines in this election. The door to prosperity will not stay open forever. This is the day and the hour for Scotland. This is the day and this is the hour. But we must make it happen for ourselves. We have to choose between the Unionist past and Scotland's future. There is a new Scotland open to us. A Scotland free of the chains of the Union, free of the threat of nuclear destruction, and free of the shameful burden of poverty and unemployment. A Scotland governed by its own people, for its own people. A Scotland that can hold its head up high in the international community, free and prosperous at last. That's the Scotland that every one of us here is working for. That's the Scotland that we can start to build when we vote for the SNP and independence on Thursday. But let me tell you this. Let no one in this party, and let no one in Scotland, blame the English or anyone else for the current state of our country. opportunity at this election, at every election, to act decisively to save our nation. And if we don't do that, then that's my fault, that's your fault, that's Scotland's fault, but it's nobody else's fault but ours. See, being a nation does confer rights, but it also confers responsibilities. It's our right to self-determination. It's our right to be independent. But it's also our responsibility to face that challenge. Let there be no doubt. Major's message tonight to the people of England was to wake up and save the United Kingdom. Our message to Scotland next Thursday is to rise up and be a nation again. Because we've all got work to do. Understand that some of Jim's campaign team are in here. And there's campaign teams from all the constituencies all over central Scotland. There even a few from further afield. We've got 4 days to save this nation. Let's get on with the job and let's make sure we win this election for Scotland. Thank you very much.